I apologize, your account has been frozen due to suspected fraudulent activity. The cashier announced loudly in front of several clients, insulting them. Thomas Harper, 82, remained mute, his hands quivering as he held his veteran's card. Someone was taping him from behind. 17 minutes later, at headquarters, the CEO's phone rang. On the other end, General Reardon is here. We need to talk. Nobody anticipated the branch to be closed by the evening, a public apology issued, and one teller's career destroyed. And you, please express respect if you feel that honor does not diminish with poverty or age. Thomas Harper had contacted the main banking office in downtown Salt Lake City 3 days before Monday morning to inquire about his account. Despite assurances that everything would be rectified, he was now standing at the counter with a frozen account. Despite his age, his small figure was dressed in a beautifully pressed button-up shirt, and his posture reflected his years of military duty. I only need to withdraw $60 for my heart medicine, Thomas explained calmly, pushing his veteran's identification card over the desk with his prescription. I called last Friday to discuss this matter. Sophie Mason, a barely 25-year-old teller with beautiful nails and fashionable glasses, looked over his ID with obvious doubt. Her gaze flickered to the line developing behind Thomas, then returned to her computer screen. According to our system, this account has been identified for unusual activity, she continued, purposefully raising her voice above the required level. We cannot process any withdrawals until the investigation is completed. Several customers looked up from their phones, captivated by her tone. There must be an error, Thomas remarked calmly, despite his mounting unease. I've owned this account for 17 years. I only need my cardiac medicine today. Sophie's beautifully lined lips curved slightly. Suspicious transactions were detected in sites you don't usually frequent. People frequently utilize military IDs to construct sympathetic profiles in frauds. The charge lingered in the air. A businessman in line looked at his watch impatiently. A woman with a nice pocketbook murmured something to her partner, both of whom looked at Thomas with thinly veiled disgust. Someone whispered loudly enough to be heard, "These people are always trying to work the system." Thomas's aged hands trembled slightly as he collected his ID card. I've never been accused of dishonesty in my life, he admitted, barely above a whisper. Not during my 27 years of service or after. Sophie's expression was unchanged. I'm sure that's what you tell everyone, she said, cynicism evident in her tone. Instead of clogging our lines, perhaps you should contact the Veterans Affairs Office. A young man several positions back in line had his phone raised, silently capturing the incident. His expression indicated anxiety, but he remained mute. Thomas reached into his pocket and placed his medical documents on the counter. This is my heart condition diagnosis. The medicine costs $58. Without it, he trailed off, his dignity keeping him from saying further. Sophie scarcely looked at the papers. I can't assist you. Next customer, please. For a minute, Thomas stood immobile, the weight of public humiliation evident in the small stoop of his shoulders. Then, with the same calm that had carried him through conflict zones, he carefully gathered his papers, turned, and headed for the exit. No one moved forward to assist. Nobody spoke up. The line simply proceeded forward, with the next client eagerly discussing their purchase as if nothing noteworthy had occurred. Outside, Thomas leaned against the building, taking deep breaths to calm his racing heart. The prescription he couldn't get was supposed to prevent the same pressure he was experiencing in his chest. He'd never pleaded for anything in his life, and he wasn't about to start now, even if his health relied on it. What Thomas didn't realize was that the young man who had captured the incident was already uploading the video to TikTok with the caption, "Bank treats elderly veteran like garbage over 60 heart medication." By lunchtime, the video had 10,000 views. By 3 p.m., it had surpassed 100,000 views, with comments such as, "Disgraceful treatment of someone who served our country. Why didn't anyone in the line say anything? That teller should be terminated immediately." As Thomas carefully made his way to the bus stop, unconscious of the impending digital storm, he pulled out a worn address book and discovered a number he hadn't contacted in years. There was one person who might understand, who still believed that how you treated others was important. He'd write to Brigadier General Maxwell Reardon, his old commanding officer and one of the few individuals Thomas had ever actually admired. Thomas Harper never asked for help, he merely expressed his dissatisfaction with the state of the country he served. "I apologize for getting emotional here, but how can someone who has spent their life to safeguarding our freedom be treated so disrespectfully?" Thomas Harper was not always the old guy with worn hands and a little droop in his shoulders. From 1962 to 1989, he worked with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, where he built bridges, roads, and infrastructure in some of the most perilous locations on the planet. His military career began in Korea, when he served as a young lieutenant and helped reconstruct crucial transportation networks. Later, during 2 deployments in Vietnam, Thomas supervised teams who built emergency medical facilities and landing zones despite enemy fire. His mechanical talents saved countless lives by allowing for the swift evacuation of the wounded. However, Thomas's most significant contribution occurred after the battle. Recognizing the psychological toll of war, he qualified as a counselor and spent the last decade of his service assisting younger men coping with the transition home. He created creative programs that integrated practical skill development with psychological resiliency strategies. Bridges are more than simply physical structures, he would inform the men and women under his supervision. Sometimes the most essential bridges we construct are those that allow individuals to pass from darkness into light. His method was groundbreaking at the time. When others told veterans to toughen up, Thomas provided safe spaces for them to express their invisible wounds. Several of his programs served as blueprints for what would eventually emerge into modern veteran support services. After retirement, Thomas relocated to Salt Lake City and chose a modest apartment near the Veterans Hospital, where he volunteered 3 days per week. His military pension met his basic requirements, and he lived simply, donating often to homeless outreach initiatives that targeted ex-service personnel. Thomas was diagnosed with a heart problem 5 years ago, which was linked to his exposure to Agent Orange while serving in Vietnam. The Veterans Affairs paid the majority of his medical care, but there were certain gaps, such as a specialized drug that needed a minor monthly copayment. His granddaughter in Seattle typically transferred money to his account, but she was now overseas and had little connection. Thomas never revealed to anyone that he had gotten the Distinguished Service Cross for courage in 1968. During an ambush that killed half of his engineering unit, Thomas not only completed their mission of building a critical bridge, but also carried 2 wounded soldiers to safety while under heavy fire. General Maxwell Reardon, a young captain at the time, was attached to Thomas's unit as an observer. He had observed Thomas's bravery personally and never forgot it over the years. Their paths intersected on occasion, with Reardon ascending up the ranks while admitting his obligation to Thomas's leadership example. In a military magazine article, Reardon argued that certain men command respect simply by virtue of their rank. Others, like as engineer Thomas Harper, command it via their behaviors and the quiet dignity with which they work. Thomas, now 82, followed the same ideals that had guided him throughout his military career. He never complained about his health issues or financial limits. He continued to volunteer despite his heart problems, knowing that helping others was the best medication for his own spirit. The previous Friday, Thomas called the bank after discovering his account had been frozen. The customer care agent informed him that the flag was standard and would be removed within 24 hours. Based on this information, Thomas waited until Monday to visit the branch, scheduling it to coincide with his medicine needs. He had not anticipated Sophie Mason's treatment. In his whole career, despite facing enemy fire and life-threatening situations, Thomas had never felt more diminished than he did standing at that counter, openly accused of dishonesty in front of a crowd of strangers. The money didn't disturb him. Thomas has already endured poverty and survived. It was the casual harshness, the presumption that his military ID was fake, and the message that his service was meaningless. In that moment, he felt invisible, not as a customer, but as a person. After leaving the bank, Thomas sat by the bus stop and penned a letter to General Reardon. He did not seek intervention. He just related his perspective, commenting on how the principles they had both served to safeguard were becoming increasingly missing in civilian life. "I am concerned not for myself," he wrote with a steady hand, "but for a society that has forgotten that respect is not acquired by wealth or prestige, but is the fundamental right of every individual who has led an honest life." Thomas sent the letter that afternoon, expecting nothing in response. General Reardon was undoubtedly preoccupied with more pressing problems than an elderly soldier's complaint about poor customer service. What Thomas didn't realize was that Maxwell Reardon, now a three-star general with tremendous influence in military and political circles, still had a photograph of the bridge Thomas had built under fire in 1968 on his desk. Beside it was a personal slogan assigned to Thomas by Reardon. "The way we treat the vulnerable defines us more than how we treat the powerful." When Reardon's aide sent Thomas's letter, along with the viral video, which had now reached 500,000 views, the general responded quickly and decisively. "Get me the CEO of that bank," he said. His own number, not the business one. Gertie Swing Daniel Whitaker, CEO of National Trust Financial, was midway through a board meeting when his personal phone vibrated with an unknown number. He would normally have ignored it, but something prompted him excuse himself and accept the call. Whitaker spoke, he responded, walking into the corridor. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Brigadier General Maxwell Reardon, United States Army," said the reply, his voice bearing the unmistakable authority of someone used to commanding. "I'm phoning to report an incident at your Salt Lake City main branch this morning involving veteran Thomas Harper." Whitaker frowned. As CEO of the nation's 12th largest bank, he rarely dealt with individual branch issues. "I'm unfamiliar with the situation, General. Maybe my customer service team." "With respect, Mr. Whitaker," Reardon interrupted, "this is not a customer service issue. This is about fundamental beliefs and how your organization treats individuals who have served our country." There was a pause when Reardon's aide played the TikTok video on his phone. Whitaker listened with increasing dismay as he heard the teller's contemptuous tone. "The clear suggestion is that Thomas was trying fraud." Murmurs from other customers. Reardon stated, "This video has now been viewed over 600,000 times. More importantly, the man being humiliated is Lieutenant Thomas Harper, a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. Throughout his 27-year career, he saved my life and the lives of countless others." Whitaker's business crisis management training kicked in. "General, I promise you that we take this situation seriously. I'll have my team examine right away, and let me be clear," Reardon continued, his voice lowering to a quiet intensity that was more effective than shouting. "Thomas Harper has never asked me to make this call. He's overly proud. I'm acting because your employee's behavior goes against everything Thomas dedicated his life protecting." Whitaker noticed himself standing straighter, as if at attention. "What would you want me to do, General?" "Three things," Reardon said without hesitation. "First, Thomas Harper's account should be unfrozen immediately, with a personal apology from your school. Second, your employee's flagrant disrespect necessitates suitable response. Third, your bank should provide training on how to serve veterans and elderly customers with dignity." Whitaker had already texted his executive assistant. "Consider the first point completed within an hour. Regarding the employee, our policies require. Your protocols," Reardon strongly stated, "permitted an 82-year-old heart patient with a distinguished service record to be charged like a criminal for attempting to use his own money to purchase life-saving medication. I recommend examining those protocols." By the end of the call, Whitaker had sent his chief operating officer to the Salt Lake City branch, ordered an immediate audit of any flagged accounts belonging to customers over the age of 65, and personally contacted Thomas Harper's residence. When there was no response, Whitaker realized Thomas might still be looking for a means to receive his prescription. He quickly directed a senior vice president to seek Thomas and guarantee that his medical needs were met. Sophie Mason was placed on administrative leave pending review at 3 o'clock that afternoon, although most within the organization understood her career at the bank was basically gone. The branch manager, who was aware of the occurrence but took no action, was also investigated. Whitaker received word at 4 p.m. that Thomas had been located at the Veterans Hospital, where he had gone to seek emergency pharmaceutical assistance. A bank representative was dispatched promptly, with authorization to cover any medical expenses and personally accompany Thomas wherever he needed to go. Thomas's immediate response was typical of the man. He declined special treatment. He told the startled bank official, "I don't want charity. I only wanted to be treated with basic dignity." General Reardon made a personal call to persuade Thomas to accept the bank's assistance. "This isn't charity, Thomas," Reardon told his old friend. "This is them correcting their error. Allow them to do the right thing." By 5 p.m., National Trust Financial had published a public statement apologizing for the event and pledging a thorough review of their policy on account security flags, particularly for senior and veteran customers. They also pledged a big donation to a veteran support group. The Salt Lake City branch would be closed the following day for obligatory sensitivity training for all employees. Customers were guided to alternate branches by door signs, which also featured a public apology for the incident. That evening, Daniel Whitaker called Thomas Harper, who had returned home safely with his prescription. "Mr. Harper," Whitaker stated, "I would like to personally apologize for the way you were treated today." Thomas just said, "I accept your apology, but I am not the only veteran who uses your bank." "I understand," Whitaker stated. "We are immediately implementing modifications. May I ask what else you recommend we do?" Thomas was silent for a moment. "Train your employees to see the person, not the transaction. That is all any of us want. To be seen as human people, make a statement, seek justice, express gratitude, or remain with him. If you believe that some wars are waged at customer service counters, the story of Thomas Harper and National Trust Financial went viral on social media and traditional news sites by the next morning. The initial TikTok video had received over 2 million views, and the bank's public apologetic statement sparked another wave of publicity. Major networks covered the story. CNN aired a segment titled, "Respect Denied: How a Veteran's Bank Visit Sparked National Outrage." Fox News spoke with many retired military officers regarding the treatment of veterans in civilian society. MSNBC explored the broader ramifications of customer service in the digital age, where any interaction has the potential to go viral. The National Veterans Alliance published a statement denouncing the bank's original treatment of Thomas and commending the prompt response following General Reardon's intervention. They also indicated that they would be examining its organizational banking arrangements, implying that other veterans organizations may do the same. Financial companies that want to assist veterans must recognize that respect is an absolute prerequisite. According to the statement, Thomas Harper's incident exemplifies a troubling pattern of contempt for veterans. The banking industry took note. Within days, 3 major national banks announced new training efforts geared exclusively toward servicing veterans and the elderly. The American Bankers Association called an emergency meeting to explore industry-wide norms for resolving sensitive account security issues while maintaining customer dignity. Locally, the impact was even more noticeable. The Salt Lake City branch was closed for 3 days rather than the originally intended one, while additional training was implemented throughout the regional network. When it reopened, a small number of veterans stood outside, not in protest, but to support the improvements being implemented. Inside, each employee wore a little pin that read "Respect First," a program quickly designed by the bank's marketing team but adopted wholeheartedly by employees horrified by the incident and its aftermath. Thomas stayed mainly out of the public eye, denying most interview requests. His only public statement came from General Reardon. "I hope something positive comes out of this awful scenario. Not for myself, but for all veterans and the elderly, who deserve to be treated with fundamental human dignity." Eli Jenkins, a 24-year-old marketing student, was abruptly thrust into the spotlight after recording the video. When interviewed on a morning talk show, he expressed regret for not intervening more effectively. "I knew recording it was vital," he explained, "but I wish I had spoken up at the moment as well. It is not sufficient to document injustice. We need to actively oppose it." His university utilized the incident as a teaching tool, including it in business ethics lectures. The dean of the business school invited Thomas to talk to students on ethics and customer service, but Thomas gently declined, recommending that they invite younger veterans instead. Perhaps the most significant development occurred when Daniel Whitaker introduced the Harper Protocol, a company-wide project that would completely alter how the bank detected and adjudicated suspected fraud cases, particularly those affecting vulnerable populations. What occurred to Mr. Harper caused us to realize severe weaknesses in our protocols, Whitaker admitted during a press conference. Starting immediately, any security flag on accounts belonging to seniors or veterans will require supervisor review before any customer-facing action is done. The bank established a separate support line for veteran and elderly customers who were having account troubles, staffed by highly trained individuals with increased authority to handle problems swiftly. Sophie Mason's departure from National Trust Financial was confirmed 1 week after the incident. In an unexpected turn of events, she contacted Thomas through General Reardon, demanding the opportunity to apologize in person. Thomas agreed to meet her at the Veterans Center, where he volunteers. Their talk was private, but those who saw Sophie leave said she seemed genuinely touched by the meeting. Sophie began volunteering at a local elder care facility 3 weeks after enrolling in a community college course on veterans issues. When queried about the changes, she simply stated, "I learned an important lesson about who I want to be in this world." Hundreds of letters were sent to Thomas from all around the country, which was the most emotional response. Veterans have shared similar experiences with contempt in civilian contexts. Elderly folks describe their attempts to preserve dignity while navigating systems that appear to be meant to irritate them. Families expressed gratitude for raising attention to an issue that had impacted their loved ones. A veteran Marine wrote, "You stood there in silence with more dignity than I could have managed. But your silence spoke volumes, and we all knew it." Thomas Harper resumed his daily routine with customary modesty. Every morning, he rode the 715 bus to the coffee shop near the Veterans Center, got the same black coffee, and arrived at his volunteer location by 8:30. If other customers knew him from the news, he graciously declined their attention, choosing to concentrate on the veterans he served rather than his personal experience. What had changed was the way people reacted to him. Bus drivers addressed him by name. The coffee shop personnel refused to accept his money. Strangers would occasionally approach him to shake his hand or say, "Thank you for your service." That now held a greater meaning. National Trust Financial made lasting adjustments to its business. The Harper Protocol was formally included into their company policy manual, and framed copies were exhibited in each branch. Daniel Whitaker personally assured that Thomas never had another banking problem, and Thomas continued to manage his little finances with the same care he always did. 6 months after the tragedy, the Veterans Center, where Thomas helped, opened a new administrative wing called Harper Hall. Thomas grudgingly consented to the name after being persuaded that it would help attract greater funds for projects that benefit younger veterans. General Reardon flew from Washington to attend the dedication event and offer remarks. Standing tall in his full dress uniform, despite his own advanced age, he spoke of Thomas's quieter heroics throughout his life, rather than his military awards or the banking event. True heroism, Reardon reminded the audience, is rarely about big events that create headlines. It is about making the persistent decision to live with integrity, to assist others without expecting to be recognized, and to keep your dignity even when others fail to do so. Thomas sat silently throughout the speech, uncomfortable with the attention but knowing its significance to the center's objective. When called to speak, he approached the microphone with the same directness that had distinguished his military career. "I don't need an apology," he said simply. "I simply want us to view one another as humans first, before any other label or category." These phrases were eventually etched on a tiny bronze plaque in the entrance hall. The banking industry provided the most substantial acknowledgement. The American Bankers Association developed the annual Thomas Harper Award for Excellence in Respectful Customer Service, which is given to financial organizations that have proven an exemplary dedication to treating all customers with dignity. 1 year after the event, a journalist working on a follow-up piece discovered Thomas at his normal coffee shop table. When asked how he felt about his unforeseen impact, Thomas thought carefully. "I'm simply one man standing at a counter, he finally admitted. The essential point is not what occurred to me, but what occurs next time, when no one is filming and no general calls. That's when we'll see if anything has truly changed. If you feel that some wars take place in front of a counter rather than on the battlefield, then this story is for you. Subscribe to Tale Strength for more heartfelt stories and veteran stories honoring the unsung heroes. Respect is not a policy, it is a choice.